Perfect. All on you.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for getting a head start on hand stripping. Andy, I just want to double check that I'm pinned. Okay, because when I am on speaker view, I'm not seeing myself. So I just wanted to be sure of that.
Yep, I have you pinned. And for those of you who want to make sure that you can see Leslie, you might have to change your view so that who is pinned is what's showing up. But otherwise, yeah, you are pinned.
Okay, excellent. And I figured out how to pin myself for myself so I can see what I'm showing everyone. Excellent. So to get started, one of the first questions is, what is hand stripping? And hand stripping is the process of finger plucking or using a tool to pull the long coat, the long hairs out of a hard strip coat breed like the Schnauzer. This is Karma. She's a really good example for us to work with because you don't usually get an opportunity to see a Schnauzer in the mature coat. She's been growing out this coat since last summer. So it's actually about 8 or 9 months of growth here. And part of what I want you to really see in a very hard coated dog is how this jacket, and we call it a jacket because it fits like a jacket. It's what keeps the dog protected from the weather in the Alps where the breed originated. So snow, wind, cold, all of those things need to not get through this coat for this breed of dog to do its original job, which was all-purpose farm dog. So the nice, really hard coat like Karma has a number of genetic features to it. And these all come into play for the correctness of the Schnauzer coat. And the more correct a Schnauzer coat you have, the easier it is to strip, the easier it is to maintain, the easier it is to learn. Just everything is easier about working with a stripped coat, the more correct the coat is. So what are the factors that make the coat correct versus not correct? I'm just gonna pull a little bit of this hair here. These hairs, for reference, are about 4.5 inches long. And what makes the coat hard is at the tip, you see the big white band, and it's got a black tip down at this end, and then the long part of it is grown out, and that's the final black band that goes to the skin. Now, what makes this an effective weather repellent coat is how long that black and white band is. On an all black dog, the coat does the same thing. It's just a lot easier to see what's going on the salt and pepper coat. Now, once it transitions from the white band into the final black band, it gets much finer. It's not nearly as big around. So the main factors that influence whether it's a good coat is how hard is that tip? How long is that hard section? Because some hand strip dogs, some individual coats, the white part, the strippable part, is only about this long, as opposed to Karma's, which is about that long. So we have how hard the coat is, how long the coat is, that's hard, and the diameter of the hair. One other aspect that isn't really part of correctness per se, but is certainly a factor you can breed for, is how easily does it pull from the skin. So if you're looking at a show dog, either you have one or you're considering showing one, you're considering getting into showing, so you haven't gotten your puppy yet, whatever. How hard it is to strip the coat is an important aspect. plus those other elements. And those are all things you can talk to your breeder about. So for example, when Karma has her puppies, I expect her to pass this coat on pretty well. And I will make sure that the sire that I breed her to also has a good hard coat, so I can continue to perpetuate that. It's also important in a correct coat that the hairs are straight. They don't have a wave to them. They don't have a soft layer in between. It's not very common, but I'm starting to see it more, and it's a problem, especially in this area, that it's neither hard coat nor undercoat. It's got some length on it, but it's soft, and it's not good coat in terms of protecting the dog, and it's hard to work with. It can be hard to tell the difference between that and a broken coat, which we'll get into a little bit more, but those are some additional things that we want to look at in terms of what makes a correct coat. So when we look close at this, and let me take a couple of close-up pictures that I can add to the replay, add to the recording, to the post with the recording. I want you to see how it clumps together in almost like scales. So it really makes it easy for the weather to just roll off, the water to just roll off, or the snow to just come off. And when it's grown out like this, it's also easy to see some of these areas. Where would I start with this? Well, we could pick at it a little bit at a time, or we could run a rake through it. There's a lot of different ways that we could approach working with this coat. I'm going to add one more thing, which is a plea to breeders. If you're a breeder, please don't saddle newbies with a difficult coat. It makes it really difficult, the learning curve. It's not rewarding. It makes it a lot harder for these new show prospects to feel success, gain success in the ring, and want to keep going. So if you are placing a show prospect with a novice or a beginner person, please, please, please give them the best opportunity to succeed by making sure that you're breeding for good coats and you're placing puppies with good coats with new exhibitors. Please help us to have people who stay in this for a long period of time, so that we get more people to join our ranks to continue to promote and prolong the existence of this wonderful breed that we love so much. All right. So there are three main aspects to hand stripping. There's tools, technique, and timing. Everything comes down to that. And when we're looking at tools, each has its own purpose. We go from one tool is our fingers. For finger plucking, I could pull all of this coat down by hand. Some people, that's how they do all of it. They only finger pluck the whole dog. That's fine. It's a great way to learn. In fact, it's the best way to learn, because you learn how to pick the hairs you're going to pull, deliberately only pull what you intend to. And if you become discerning that way with your finger plucking technique, then when you add different tools like a stripping stone or a stripping knife, it's a lot easier to get a good result, because you're already in the mindset of, let me pick which hairs I'm going to pull and pull just them. It's easy when we start using stripping tools like a stripping knife to rely on the tool a little too much and get in a hurry, and we start pulling and we think it's all about just getting the job done, not about getting the job done right. And we end up breaking coat, and when we break the coat, that's when we end up losing the nice salt and pepper look, and we get a more consistently gray appearance to the coat. Basically what that is when the coat grows out and we got the long final black band, that coat gets finer and finer the longer it gets. So if you dig down into the coat to pull it, or you're not mindful about what you're pulling, you're going to break the hair, you're going to cut it or snap it, and it will continue to grow out just that black tip. And then that becomes harder and harder to pull over time. So we want to make sure that we have the good technique first, and then we can kind of graduate to some of the tools. Now, I want you to notice too, that her head is nice and short. As long as her body is, her head is short. And I really recommend, if you're a beginner, that you approach hand stripping from a point where it's easy to succeed and easy to see good results. This whole body of coat, that's a lot of hair to deal with. And if you haven't started the process of pulling yet, this would be hours and hours of work that you may not know. If you are that interested in, you may not know if your dog's coat is good enough, correct enough to work in this way. And if it's going to take you some time to see your results. So I recommend starting with the head and finger plucking every 2 weeks so you can keep a consistent, short, nice headpiece. If you do that, plus you maintain your maintenance clipper work, then even though the coat may go through some unusual changes while you're learning what you're doing, it will still look like the dog is well maintained and frequently maintained. So I recommend, if you're just starting out, working on the head. Andy, if you wouldn't mind posting the link to, I have a playlist on my YouTube channel for beginners and hand stripping, finger plucking the heads. So Andy's going to post that link in the chat. And if you're a beginner and you want to see how to really get started in more detail than I can do in this brief overview, then that's the place to go to get started. Once you're there, there's a lot of videos on the YouTube channel, Dogs and Dharma, to help you learn more about lots of different parts about hand stripping. But that's the playlist that you're going to want to start on if you're a beginner. Each of the tools has a different purpose. So we've got finger plucking, fingers, to make it a little easier to build your finger strength, or to make it a little easier to pluck. I usually recommend putting some ear powder in the coat. That makes it a little grippier. And you can just sprinkle a little on your hand and kind of sprinkle it into the coat, or put some on your hands and rub it lightly, tap it, or rub it into the areas you want to work. A little goes a long way. You don't need much. And then you're not going to be working quite as hard when you pull, and it'll be more comfortable for the dog. You got fingers. Then we have textured tools, like a stone. There's different kinds of stones, lots of different types. This one's made by Greyhound. There's one that a lot of people like by Groomer.dk. I don't have one of those yet, but I can't wait to get one so that I can do a review for you guys on it. But a lot of people have really said that they like the Groomer.dk tools. I like the Greyhound stones. These, like the finger plucking, don't break the hair. So again, with my finger plucking technique, now all I'm doing is I'm adding a tool, and I'm going to practice good technique, which we'll get into a little bit more in a minute after we go over some of the other tools. But you can see, basically, the stone, the textured tool replaces my forefinger, and I just put the hair between my thumb and the tool, and I pull. There's so many different types of stripping knives. And everybody has different preferences. And when I first learned, this is one I like called a Mickey. Some old Pearson strippers and lots of different kinds. When I was first introduced to hand stripping by my grooming school instructor and mentor, I asked, how do I know which tool to use? She put a big pile of them down for me to strip my first Westie, my first dog. And she said, just find the one that fits your hand the best. And largely that advice has always stuck for me. And that's pretty much how people discern them. Some of them are made with a bigger handle, so maybe they're made for bigger hands. Some of them are more comfortable in a small hand, but the tool being comfortable in your hand actually is probably the thing that will give you the best technique. There are a few special ones that I know people have. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Now, there's two that we use for carding, but not for stripping. The butter knife type, not for stripping. And the magnet stripper, not for stripping. These are for carding out undercoat. They do have the same kind of edge, but I've always found that these are very bad culprits for breaking coat. So especially if you're learning, these are not the tools you want to learn with. So if these are the ones you have in your kit, you're going to want to find something else to start with. And there's a lot of different ones. It'd be great if somebody wanted to start a post in the group about different tools and which ones you like. If you're an experienced person with hand stripping, by all means, go ahead and make a post about your favorite tools and why they are good tools for you. Everyone's going to have to go through a process of trying different tools to find the one that suits them the best. One other tool is an Andis rake or a Coat King. Rakes are useful for example, when I first start stripping her, since all of this coat is grown out, if I were to strip it all at one time, she'd be down to just undercoat and all the coat would grow back in at one time. So it wouldn't be a good way to get in what we call a rotated or rolling coat, where we create a consistent appearance by working the coat regularly, like every 2, 3, 4 weeks, something like that. Socialization is a good time for using a rake. What the rake does is it's going to pull coat consistently throughout without, putting holes in, without concentrating too much in one area. It's a good way to just start to pull coat from all over. You do want to be really careful with the rake. Make sure you dull it. So literally I dig in the dirt with mine and then I stick it in the dishwasher for 2 or 3 weeks. So the heat from the dishwasher will dull the blades, because we want the blades to be dull so that they pull the coat, not cut it. This is a good tool in some circumstances and it's a bad tool in others. If you are show grooming, don't use a rake. If you are in the process of getting your dog in coat, you're in the process of getting started with a coat that's very long, they're very useful for that. And so everything has its place. Now, we talked a little bit about finger plucking, using the tools. There's another aspect of technique. Let's talk about technique a little bit. We've done things correctly if what we've done is we've pulled the coat. Again, this hair is like 4.5 inches long. Now, the softer the coat is, often the harder it is to pull. I'm not sure why the genetics work that way, but my experience is most of the time, the harder coats are easier to pull and the softer coats are harder to pull. That includes if hard coat like hers has gotten broken, it will also be a little bit harder to pull. So if we're repairing a coat or the coat's grown out a lot, we have to be more careful about breakage. So one of the things we can do besides putting the ear powder in, that made the hair grippier, is that you can grip the skin a little bit ahead of where you're pulling and make the skin taut. And if the skin is taut, you know, it's easier to show you if I go left-handed. If the skin is taut, then the hair also pulls more easily. So when we're stripping, we're also doing some holding of the skin to make it easier to pull out. And when you get into some more of the more sensitive areas, like maybe the back of the legs or on the shoulder, then holding, how you hold the skin, where you hold the skin, is definitely going to impact how easy or difficult it might be. So can hold the skin, and I'm not squeezing it, I'm just holding it, and then right behind it, I'm pulling. So that's my basic finger plucking technique. Again, that's gone over in a lot of detail in that YouTube playlist. We really want to be mindful and not break the coat because, like I said, we start getting patchy results. We get a softer coat, it starts sticking out, and it's not as attractive, and it's not as correct in the show ring. And so you want to be careful about that. Really important is your technique with your hand. So starting with the finger plucking, what you want to do is you want to begin the habit of locking your wrist in place. So when I'm pulling the hair, the only thing that's moving is my elbow and my shoulder. My hand doesn't move. My wrist doesn't move. And when you switch to using a tool, it's exactly the same. Your wrist doesn't move. You grip at the tip with your thumb, the tool, your wrist is locked, only your elbow and your shoulder will move. And you gradually increase the pressure until the hair comes out. Don't yank it. There are some times when it's necessary to yank it, but generally that's a little less comfortable for the dog. You're going to get more complaining. Most of the time, if the dog is fussy about hand stripping, it's because we're going too fast or we're pulling too much hair at one time. So if they're fussy, that's feedback. And we should take it into account. Try pulling a little less fast, a little less at a time. The number one culprit for breaking coat is using a stripping knife and twisting your wrist as you pull. You can see the stripping knife has a textured edge. This is to help you grip. It's not supposed to cut. It's to help you grip the hair. And if I hold it like this and I hold my wrist straight as I pull back, that doesn't change. However, if I twist my wrist as I'm pulling, now that edge is coming into the hair and it's breaking it. So if you're getting broken coat, really look at what your technique is like. Put the hair here, grip it with your thumb against the flat part of the blade and come straight back. Only your elbow and your shoulder moves. Wrist is locked into place. Now, sometimes we want to card out undercoat, and I showed you a couple of tools we could use for that: the butter knife, a magnet stripper, Furminator. These are all tools that are used for carding undercoat. When a coat's this long, you can't card the undercoat very well. Don't try. These tools will tend to break your longer coat, and you won't be able to get down to the undercoat. Now, assuming, let's pretend that she has less coat. Maybe her coat's very short. Maybe it's almost in show length. or it's starting to grow back in, or I've just stripped a layer off. If I was going to use one of the carding tools, I'm still going to hold the skin ahead of where I'm going to work. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently increase pressure into the coat as I'm pulling back, and gradually increase the pressure, and then make long, slow strokes, and that will tend to accumulate undercoat in the tool. Very important that you're not digging in and then pulling, or doing it too fast and kind of scrubbing. That's going to break a lot of top coat. So again, the carding tools for getting out undercoat do not serve a long coat. You're going to want to have a short coat in order to use those carding tools to get to the undercoat. Now, another thing that the rake is good for is your blend lines. So maybe I want to do a little bit. Typically, when we strip, we're going to strip down to just above the elbow. We're going to strip at the neckline and along the back of the legs. And so there's an upper thigh and a lower thigh. And generally speaking, as a guideline, as kind of a landmark when you're learning, you're going to strip so that you're stripping the upper thigh, but maybe the lower thigh is the part where you're going to start to grow out your furnishings. After you've done that, you may find, then you can start to look at how the line matches the individual dog, because it's going to change a little bit. Some dogs have more natural angulation, some dogs are straighter, and you're going to make some changes based on that. But you can use the rake to help blend the area between where you're stripping and where your furnishings are, so you can get a little bit nicer, more uniform shift from the hard hand stripped to the long furnishings. Okay. All right. Just as a reminder, please do go ahead and put questions in the chat as we go along. I've got another section coming up on timing, but if you have any questions on what we've done so far with tools and techniques, go ahead and pop them in the chat so that we have questions to answer in our Q&A section at the end. All right, now, critical part of hand stripping is the timing. And there's several elements of timing that are significant. All this hair that we've pulled, that I'm pulling today, it'll take 6 weeks for that hair to sprout again. 6 weeks. So everything you pull now, you won't even be able to see the effect of it for 6 weeks. And that's an average. Some dogs grow their coat a little faster, some a little slower, but I find, especially with standards, that 6 weeks is typical from when I pull it to when it just starts to sprout through the skin. That will help you with your planning when it comes to things like shows and some other things like that. You know, if you want to plan for a big show, like in standard schnauzers and giant schnauzers in the US, our national specialties are coming up in August. And so that's 5 months or so from now, which is the perfect time to start a long coat and to have in show condition. So 6 weeks to sprout from when you pull it. The center section here grows the slowest. So if you've ever tried to strip a dog in the past and you're used to stripping the whole dog at one time, and you've ever wondered, why is it that when the neck and the shoulder and the rear is perfect, the center is too short? Or why is it that by the time the center is nice, the neck, the shoulders, and the rear have all gotten too long? The reason is because the center section grows the slowest, and these other sections grow a little bit faster. So there's 2 different approaches that we typically take to get the dog in coat. And this kind of depend on your learning style. It's going to kind of depend on what your goals are. If you're a novice or a beginner, there's really two ways to go. There's kind of incremental progress through your own individual observations. So by that, that's if you're starting with the head and you're pulling some of this hair every couple of weeks, then in 6 weeks, you should see a layer starting to come in right at the head, and keeping track of your timing, keeping track of when you do things helps you know what the speed for your individual dog's coat coming in is. You can start by plucking the body, raking, and working incrementally and seeing how it comes in. And that's a little bit like the difference between if I give you a fish versus teach you to fish. The teaching to fish is the incremental, do it, pluck it, see what happens. Give yourself grace. Understand that if you're new, if you're a novice, you should expect at least 6 months before you can start to getting a consistent appearance. It's very natural for that process of learning and beginning to take you 6 months, which is part of why I advocate for working on heads first and consistently, so they're never a big problem that ends up making everything else more difficult. Now, the for some people, easier approach, the more goal-oriented approach is section stripping. And what we do in section stripping is we strip this middle section first, and then about 3 weeks later, then we strip the neck, the shoulders, the rear. And then if we do it that way, then as the coat grows out, all of it will grow in to be a fairly consistent length at about the same time. And what I want to give you now, so for section stripping, I call it the recipe. And it is a 4-month schedule of what you would strip where in order to go from shaggy. As I put it in the recipe, from shaggy to showy in 4 months. It's a good way to get your dog into a show coat. If you're starting from when they're all grown out like this, we call it a blown coat. So if you're starting from a blown coat and you want to go to a show coat, it takes about 4 to 5 months, and you can follow the recipe. Andy's going to post that in the chat, and I'm also going to post it on the recording of this webinar so that you have it for reference. And so I'll give you a moment to take a look at that. And the other thing that's really important, if you're a beginner, a novice, you're experienced, it doesn't matter. Keep track on a calendar of the work you do. That way, when you're in the future, I always tell myself, oh, I'll remember when I do the work that I did. But then 2 months later, when did I pull that section? Gosh, I'm not sure. When did I rake that out? I'm not sure. And if I'm not sure, then I can't predict when it's going to grow in. And then that makes timing more difficult. And again, if we're showing, we put a lot of time and money and resources of all kinds into going to that dog show. And ideally, we're going because we want to be competitive, right? But if we're not paying attention to the timing of our coat, we put all of those resources out there, but then we don't have a coat that's ready at the same time. So keeping track on a calendar of when you do work, so you will know when to expect certain results. But also, if you have a calendar and you, in the future, you mark the dates of the shows that are important to you, that are what your goals are, you can reverse engineer your stripping schedule to match that so that you can have control over having a nice coat at the timing that you want. Andy's also going to post a PDF, a link to a PDF planner. It's the PDF is for 1 month of a couple of different pages to help you to take notes and to do some of these forecasting and planning and reverse engineering aspects. So print off 6 months worth, print off a year's worth. If you have multiple dogs that you're working on, you might consider having 1 calendar per dog. Or if you're very organized, or you're like me and I just use a different color of ink for each dog, then that's part of how I keep track of keeping multiple dogs in coat at different times for different goals, for different shows. And I find the planner is just really, really crucial for the process of learning to get them in coat and to not have too much work build up at one time. That's what I think sidelines most novices is. Once they get started, they don't think about that it's going to be 6 weeks before they can even start to see an effect of what they've done. And then they get confused about, what am I seeing? Did I do it right? What's happening? And if you're not taking notes, you'll be hard pressed to be able to see the way it ebbs and flows in cycles. And because hand stripping is a little bit of a puzzle over time. That's part of what makes it tricky. It's not like a poodle where as long as I brush it out good and I fluff it up good, I can just scissor a pattern on it and it's done. This takes months to grow in. This takes months to get the coat that you want, and timing is everything. So really just can't stress enough. If you don't use the planner that I've provided, get a calendar, but do take notes, do keep track. It will give you so much better results. Now, one of the things that people have asked me about too is, as you can see, Karma is quite comfortable with this process. She's an experienced show dog. She was campaigned for quite a while. And so she's used to it. But what about a puppy? What about a dog that's not used to it yet? What do we do there? There's a lot of different tips about how to build your grooming relationship. There's a lot of things that you can do to kind of remediate if the dog is fussy or just inexperienced on the table. And last December, I did a webinar called Cultivating Cooperation. And that is tips and tricks and advice and strategies for building your grooming table relationship. So if that's a place where you think, this hand stripping, okay, I'm starting to get some ideas about that, but I'm not sure my dog will stand still for it. And then that webinar might be a good resource for you. So Andy's going to put that one in the chat also. So we've talked about there's been a lot of information. So I've been talking for 40 minutes. It's hard to believe. So one thing before I get into next steps, there've been a lot of questions in the group recently about, is hand stripping right for me, for my dog? So let me give you some feedback, some pointers about that. A number of the people who've asked that question have dogs that have been clippered, clipper cut instead of hand stripped for some amount of time. And they're wondering, can I go back to hand stripping? The conventional wisdom is, if you've been clippering the dog more than one time, maybe twice, especially if your dog is now 3 years old, 4 years old, older, and has not been hand stripped, is probably not a great candidate for it because they haven't had any socialization to it. However, if you wanted to start that process from that playlist in YouTube of stripping the head and seeing how that goes, based on your results of trying to strip the head and get that into condition, that's going to give you a lot of feedback about whether this is reasonable to ask of your dog to have the whole body done. Now, sometimes a coat does get broken. I just helped somebody diagnose that a couple of weeks ago, had a show coat. They'd been raking it a lot and it was broken. But that can be brought back. Now, that's probably realistically a 4 to 6 to 8 month process to bring a broken coat back. But that's going to be a lot easier to do than one that's been clipper cut. So I think that pretty much covers that question. I wanted to make sure I touched on that before going on. There's a number of different ways that I can continue to help you if you would like to explore more of this journey of hand stripping. I will continue to post things in the Schnauzer Grooming Club, the public Facebook group. I also have a private Facebook group called Grooming Standards, and I've run a couple of courses on hand stripping through that group. I will continue to run some courses through that group in the future. There's a lot of exclusive content in that group, and it's also searchable by topic. So that's one thing that's available if you'd like to have some more resources on hand stripping. And in addition to that, I do private sessions, and I can do either individual 60-minute sessions, individual 90-minute sessions, or packages of 3 90-minute sessions. The package of 3 sessions comes with the membership in Grooming Standards. If you're interested in finding out about next steps, about working more with me directly, please email me at strawhatstandards@gmail.com. And I'll be happy to set up a free 30-minute consultation with you about what your specific needs are, what your specific goals are. Your specific dog can take a look at the coat. We can learn about learn from each other about what you'd like to find out more about and how I can help you. So that's the best way to get individualized help. And of course, if you have any questions, you can always post them in the public group. There's a lot of people in that group with experience. I don't answer every post. I don't answer most of the posts because so many good and experienced people are in that group posting good answers. And by the way, if you're one of those people, I really appreciate you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing your knowledge as well, because that's how we learn. I know what works for me. You know what works for you. If we all pool our knowledge, then we really create a knowledge base and a database of information that's applicable across so many individual dogs. So again, if you are somebody who's been contributing answers in the group, I really appreciate you. And please continue to do so. You're very welcome to be doing that. So let me see if there's anything else. Oh, yeah. In the Grooming Standards private Facebook group, it's called Grooming Standards, but it isn't just standards. There's also giant Schnauzer owners. There's also mini Schnauzer owners. And there's even a couple of Scotty owners that are in that group too. So we have a lot of different things going on there for everybody. But in that group, upcoming this year, I'm going to be stripping Karma down. Like I said, she's been growing out since the summer. This is just her wonderful winter weather coat. And I keep thinking we're almost done with winter and we keep having fake spring. So I haven't stripped her down yet, but I will be doing that and going over the process of how I tackle that in the Grooming Standards group. And I'm also going to have upcoming later this year, I'm going to have puppies Karma's in season. I'm going to be breeding her soon, and I hope to have puppies come late spring, early summer. And I'll be doing some content in that group about getting your puppies ready for hand stripping, socialization to it, getting started. How do I select for puppy coat? When I'm looking at puppies, how do I know if a puppy's going to grow up and have a nice hard coat? It's fortunately one of those things that you can tell at a very young age. Really, really easy to tell right away. Basically, the older the puppy gets before that black tip puppy coat starts to flip up, the longer that coat stays flat, that puppy coat stays flat and doesn't flip up, the harder the coat that it's going to be when they grow up. So that if you have a puppy and you're considering whether to do hand stripping with it or not, then that's kind of one of the considerations. And that would be a good thing to get on a 30-minute consult with me about, because then I can see through your computer setup, through your video camera, what kind of coat your puppy has, and give you some feedback about what you need to consider about whether it's a good candidate or not. Okay. I think I've covered just about everything I intended to. A few more things I wanted to go over is just remember, if this is new or you're a novice, you have to stay the course to see the results. So don't panic. Don't worry that you're doing it wrong. It's a learning curve for everybody. None of us stripped our first dogs perfectly the first time. Nobody. So just it's a little bit of trial and error. It's a little bit of following the recipe, perhaps. It's a little bit of maybe getting some one-on-one coaching if you need it, or some group help in either of those two groups. But it's a journey that we all go on. I'm fortunate. I'm fortunate because since I'm a professional groomer and I specialize in schnauzers, I've gotten to work a lot of coats for lines that aren't mine. So I've really seen a really broad spectrum of coat types and worked with a lot of coat types. So I have a really good idea of what works for which coat type and what doesn't work so well for other coat types. And I'm really happy to share that knowledge and help you out. I can tell she's been so patient. She's been standing here for nearly an hour. But I'm going to go ahead and come to a close for this segment so she can have a little rest. And we're going to wait about 5 minutes or so. And I'm going to go get a sip of water and come back and answer whatever questions that you may have about hand stripping. So I hope this has been helpful and useful to you, and look forward to the question and answer segment coming up in about 5 minutes or so. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to stop the recording for this one. We'll start the recording again when we do the Q&A, so that we have them as separate entities.